The year was 1945, on the night before Christmas in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder, along with 9 of their children, were asleep when a fire started in the house at around 1 a.m. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children escaped: Sylvia, Marion, John, and George Jr. The children that remained in the house were Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, and the 5 of them shared 2 bedrooms between them, both rooms upstairs. George broke back into the house to save the rest of the children, but the staircase was on fire. When he went outside to retrieve his ladder, it was missing from its normal spot, and both of his coal trucks, which he wanted to use to park outside and climb on top of, were strangely not starting.
Don't park your coal truck by a fire. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine there was coal in the truck at the time.
Okay.
I'm sure it was emptied of coal.
Well, I don't know. It's a coal truck.
He just climbs on top of a pile of coal.
He's all just covered in flammable coal, jumping into a house. Bad idea.
Marion, one of the children who escaped the fire, ran to the neighbor's house to call the fire department, but the operator didn't respond, and when a different neighbor attempted to call, she also got no response from the operator. That same neighbor actually drove to town and found the fire chief, F.J. Morris, in person. But even though the fire department was only located 2.5 miles away from the home, the firefighters bizarrely didn't reach the Sodder house until 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire began. And by the time they arrived, the house was literally ash.
Time to reevaluate your staff there.
You really see where your tax money's going there.
That's not like, oh boy, we really dropped the ball on that one. That's like firefighters from Florida could have driven up there in time.
In their defense, it was Christmas Eve.
Oh, it's fine if people die
So like,
on Christmas
they
Eve.
tried calling. I'm not saying I'm condoning them for being 7 hours late to a fire that was 2.5 miles away.
It's just not great.
In fact, I'm pretty sure I could run that in probably about an hour at least.
I could spit the fire out
I
in
could
that
probably
time.
chug a beer
I could
and
just
run
spit
that.
on the fire.
Authorities scavenged the ashes of the fire looking for the remains of the 5 missing Sodder children, but nothing was found, and they were presumed dead due to the fire. The fire chief, F.J. Morris, suggested that the fire may have been so hot that it completely cremated the children's bodies, including their bones. While that theory sounds reasonable, it is not entirely accurate, because when flesh is burned away, bones are still typically left behind, likely in fragmented form. Additionally, there was no smell of burning flesh reported during or after the fire. The cause of the fire was deemed to be bad wiring in the house, and in the week after, the Fayetteville coroner's office issued death certificates for the 5 Sodder children. The basement of the house still remained, and George would later use a bulldozer to cover it up with 5 feet of dirt to create a memorial to his children. Soon after the fire, George and Jenny began to suspect their children were not dead, but instead kidnapped, believing the fire was deliberately set as a diversion and not the result of faulty wiring. In fact, George had actually had the wiring in his house checked earlier that fall by the power company, which had deemed the wiring in safe working order.
Who said the wiring was faulty?
Somebody in the coroner's office. You'll see why they may have done this later, but
okay.
Anyways. But before we dig into the theory that the children were kidnapped, let's discuss George's personal history to provide some context.
Ooh.
George Sodder had immigrated from Italy, and Fayetteville, where the Sodders lived, had a small but engaged Italian immigrant community, a community that George was very vocal in, especially about his disdain for Mussolini, sparking a few heated debates in the community. George also reportedly never revealed why he left Italy, leading some to speculate that he may have been involved in some shady business in Italy. Many believe that either of these reasons may have led to the kidnapping of George's children. Let's examine some curious occurrences that support a possible kidnapping. In the fall, just before the house fire, a life insurance salesman came to the house, and when he saw that his sale wasn't going to be successful, he became infuriated, yelling at George, quote, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed. You're going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini," end quote. In the days leading up to the fire, 2 of the surviving Sodder sons witnessed a man watching the younger Sodder children come home from school on Highway 21. Another suspicious occurrence happened that night. On the night of the fire at around 12:30 a.m., the phone rang, and Jenny got out of bed to answer. This would result in an important observation. Jenny noticed the lights were still on downstairs. As she started to fall back asleep, she heard a loud bang on the roof, followed by the sound of something rolling. And an hour later, she woke to the smell of smoke entering her room downstairs. The detail that is interesting is the fact that the lights were still on. If the fire had been caused by faulty wiring, as had been suggested, then that meant there wouldn't have been power to the house, meaning that the lights shouldn't have been working. But Jenny saw that they were on about an hour before the smoke. And later, the Sodders would claim that they saw the lights on while the fire was occurring as well. Additionally, a witness to the fire claimed that they saw a man removing a block and tackle typically used for removing engines from cars, perhaps explaining why both of George's trucks weren't working that night.
Did they, as their post-mortem, did they look in the cars to see if there were engines in them? No.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think he removed the engines completely because it's not like he could waddle away with really heavy engines. I think maybe he just tampered with it, just pull a couple wires here and there.
Okay.
This is all a possibility.
It sure is.
I'm just presenting the case here, all right?
After the fire, when the family visited the memorial George had set up, Sylvia found a hard rubber object in the yard, an object that Jenny believed may have caused the loud bang that woke her that night. But even more interesting was the fact that after further inspection from George, he believed the object was a napalm pineapple bomb, similar to those used in the war at the time.
I mean, it sounds like someone set the house on fire.
Yeah, it clearly does. I think we have enough here to say,
Yeah.
someone probably set the house on fire. Probably wasn't faulty wiring.
With all these strange occurrences and not believing that the fire could have burned her children's bones to ash, Jenny began to experiment by burning different types of animal bones, all of which left remains. She spoke to a crematorium employee who told her that in cremation, bones were left behind even after bodies burned at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours, and the Sodder home only burned for about 45 minutes. Also noteworthy is the fact that remains of household appliances were found in the rubble, meaning not everything was ash.
So clearly, there should have been bones left.
Should have been bones.
There have also been reported sightings of the children. One occurred that night while the fire was still burning. A woman claimed to see the children in a car that drove by while the fire was still raging. 50 miles west of Fayetteville, a woman who operated a tourist stop told police that she saw the children the morning after the fire. Quote, "I served them breakfast. There was a car with Florida license plates at the tourist court too." End quote. At a hotel in nearby Charleston, a woman reported seeing 4 of the 5 children about a week after the fire. Here's her statement to the police. Quote, "The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian extraction. I do not remember the exact date. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the man appeared hostile and refused to allow me to talk to these children. I sensed that I was being frozen out, and so I said nothing more. They left early the next morning." A few years later, George saw a photo of New York City school children in a newspaper, and one of the kids looked like his missing daughter, Betty. George drove all the way to New York to investigate, but once he tracked down the child's parents, they declined to speak with him. In 1947, 2 years after the fire, George and Jenny attempted to involve the FBI, who offered to help, but in a curious turn of events, the Fayetteville police and fire departments both denied their offer. What do you gain in denying to help the FBI? All you have to do is give a couple interviews, maybe? What?
Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork.
How busy is this fire department?
They're probably not that busy, but that's probably how they like it.
I think there's some shady shit going on there, but that's just my opinion.
George and Jenny turned to a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley.
Yeah. C.C. Tinsley's here.
That does sound.
What you say? No bones, huh? Sounds like a case for
So they-
C.C. Tinsley.
Apparently, they got an investigator from a time machine. They dropped him back in a time machine.
1945, of
That's
course
not
he
how
said.
they did not
Oh,
speak
yeah.
like that. That's not how they spoke.
Yes, that's how they spoke.
One suspicious revelation occurred when Tinsley discovered that a member of the coroner's jury who decided the Sodder house fire was an accident was the same life insurance salesman who had threatened George earlier in the fall.
Who put together this jury? The coroner? We're putting together a jury to investigate this crime. Can you wrangle up all the maybe some lunatic salesmen?
By the way, is there no police officer that knows how crime works? How did they not interview this life salesman, man?
I don't know. Look, I'm telling you, nobody knows how to do their job in this town.
It's unbelievable. So you're telling me he screamed in your face that he's gonna murder your family?
Interesting.
Sounds like a good dude to me. I don't know what you're talking
Let's
about.
put him on that jury.
Another interesting find occurred when Tinsley interviewed townspeople about the fire. Tinsley heard a rumor from the town minister that the fire chief had been telling people that he'd actually found a heart in the ashes of the Sodder home, and that he'd hidden it in a dynamite box and buried it where the home once stood.
Why does the minister tell rumors?
Tinsley persuaded the fire chief to show him where it was buried, but once dug up, the heart was actually beef liver, and had never been in a fire.
Oh, darn it, that's my darn sandwich. No wonder that sandwich tasted so bad the other day. I mixed them up.
Why the hell the chief did this was apparently to provide some closure to the Sodder family.
I guess you could say that's a heartfelt gesture.
Ryan?
Oh,
No.
shit.
No.
Oh, man. See you guys later.
Nope, sit down.
In August 1949, the Sodders hired a pathologist named Oscar B. Hunter, who excavated the dirt that covered the Sodder basement and the remains of the house. He found 4 shards of human vertebrae and sent this to the Smithsonian for analysis. They hypothesized that the bones were from a 16 to 17-year-old person. However, the oldest missing Sodder child was a 14-year-old boy, making it improbable that the bones belonged to him. They also stated that there was no evidence that the bones had been exposed to fire, and that the bones likely originated from the dirt George Sodder used to fill the basement, rather than the remains of the house. This was before DNA investigation had come into play, and according to the Smithsonian, the bones were given back to George Sodder, but their current whereabouts remains a mystery.
What did he do with them? Just
Exactly, no one knows. Huge tragedy that we can't DNA analyze those bones to see if they belong to the Sodder children.
yeah.
After the Smithsonian revealed their findings, West Virginia Governor Oki L. Patterson called a hearing in the state capitol building in Charleston, West Virginia, where he officially declared the Sodder case to be closed, telling George and Jenny that their search was, quote, hopeless, end quote. This led to George and Jenny setting up a billboard on Route 16, advertising their missing children, where it remained for nearly 40 years.
40 years. They're tenacious.
I mean, to be fair, if it was my kids, I wouldn't stop. And
Yeah, I guess if 5 of your kids are have vanished.
Oh, and also a salesman screamed in my face, "I'm gonna burn your house down and
Yeah.
murder your family."
Yeah.
Then, yeah, I think I would probably keep searching.
The billboard kept the story alive and mentioned details such as the children being kidnapped, the fact that the faulty wiring did not cause the fire, the fact that there was no bones or residue found, and lastly, accused the law officers involved of a cover-up. Quote, what was the motive of the law officers involved? What did they have to gain by making us suffer all these years of injustice? Why did they lie and force us to accept those lies? End quote. People around town had various theories. Some believed the mafia had been involved. Others believed the children were now in Italy or that they had been sold to an orphanage. The family received a letter from a woman in St. Louis saying that the oldest missing daughter, Martha, was in a convent there in St. Louis. Someone in Florida also said the missing children were living with Jenny's distant relative. And the ever-diligent George Sodder investigated all these tips, but each came up empty. Another hopeful tip came in 1968, 23 years after the fire, in the form of a photograph sent to Jenny specifically addressed to her, not the family. There was no return address on the letter, but it was postmarked in Kentucky. The photo was a man in his mid-20s. George and Jenny believed this could be their son Louis, who was 9 at the time of the fire. The man in the picture had the same dark brown eyes, dark curly hair, strong straight nose, and upwardly tilting left eyebrow. On the back, it had a handwritten note. Quote, Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Lil Boys, A90132 or 35, end quote. They hired a private detective to go to Kentucky and find him, but strangely, the detective was never heard from again.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard of a detective going missing. That's like a fish drowning.
And you know what's strange about this? On the internet, nobody seems to really care about this point.
When a detective goes missing, you've got some pretty powerful adversaries. I'd say it's time to quit the game.
Some on the internet have theorized the detective took the money and ran, but nobody knows what happened to him for sure.
I don't think the detective would have taken the money and run though, because if you're a private eye, unless it was if it was enough to survive for the rest of his life.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, why would that's?
He's probably built up a nice client base. He's got throwaways Rolodex.
It's not like they gave him $1 million.
Right,
it was
it's
probably like 5,000. That's what the
Enough for
poster
a few
said.
sandwiches.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, those are some big sandwiches, but yeah,
Hey.
point taken.
George Sodder passed away shortly after in 1969 at the age of 74, and Jenny Sodder passed away in 1989 at the age of 85. Sylvia, who was 2 at the time, is the last remaining Sodder child alive. She maintains that her siblings did not die in the fire that night. Jenny Henthorne, Sylvia's daughter, told the Times West Virginian to post any information on websleuths.com. Quote, my mom promised my grandmother that she would never let the story die. That's what my brother and I are doing now. End quote. After all these years, the question still remains. What really happened to the Sodder children that one fateful night? Was this truly the result of a tragic house fire? Or Were the children actually kidnapped? Hopefully, for the sake of the remaining family, all of these questions will be answered. But for now, the case remains unsolved.
I do think